Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville City Council budget work session. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager. Deborah Campbell, please take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council, guests in the chamber, and those that may be watching remotely. Today is the last regularly scheduled budget work session. And before the manager's budget is presented in May. This is our third work session, but we have had many conversations, starting with your retreat in February, and you received public comment on the budget also in February. We have a lot to cover today, mostly related to compensation, providing the follow-up information that you requested from our last work session, as well as providing an update on the capital improvement plan. Tony McDowell and Lindsay Spangler, Finance and Management Services staff, and Jade Dundas, Interim Assistant City Manager, will be our presenters for this meeting. And before I turn it over to Tony, I want to remind council that there is a really important milestone in the budget adoption process that's on your agenda at tonight's meeting. It involves action on an item under new business entitled an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2025-26 fees and charges manual. The adoption of the suggested fees is a critical step in the budget process that we sincerely hope you will approve as it relates to staff's recommended fee changes, which only applies to water fees and Memorial Stadium hourly event usage. So with that, I will now turn it over to Tony McDowell.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and good afternoon, council members. Like Ms. Campbell said, we are at our third budget work session today. So I'm going to go to the key takeaways to start us off, as we always do. And so the first two items in the key takeaways are really updates from a financial perspective. Staff has continued to review our financial projections both for this year and next fiscal year, and we've been able to identify some additional opportunities to close the general fund budget gap next year through some revenue increases and also some expense reductions. Also, we want to highlight to council something called the FEMA Community Disaster Loan Program. It is a loan program that we'll provide some information on, and the city has applied to that program, and we're awaiting notification regarding our application. If we receive this award, it would be up to $5 million, and we would come back to you all after we had received notification of award for official approval. But what we wanted to do today is kind of give you all a little bit of a heads up about what that program is and talk about some possible options for how that funding could be utilized in the budget process. The next two items on the key takeaways relate to compensation. We talked to you all about compensation at your last work session, and you all requested some additional information, specifically a multi-year financial analysis of the proposed APD and AFD compensation changes. We have those projections to show you all today. We also have projections for adding a fourth shift at AFD, and can show you those numbers as well. The second part of our compensation discussion today is going to relate to compensation increases for general employees. We shared with some scenarios with you all at the last work session, and specifically the 3% hybrid scenario is the one we're going to show again today and recommend to you all. And that is the approach that would have the most significant impact in terms of lifting existing full-time permanent employees above the local living wage. And then finally, the third part of our presentation today is going to focus on our capital improvement program. Jade Dundas is going to present that to you all. We're going to show you all some details related to our CIP, our capital improvement program, and that includes what we call our regular CIP, our GeoBond projects, as well as recovery projects as well. And then finally, as Ms. Campbell mentioned, this is the last work session before we bring you all the manager's proposed budget in early May. So we will utilize you all's direction today to finalize that manager's proposed budget. And then that final bullet point there, just a reminder that the May proposed budget is not the final step. You all will have about a month to deliberate the budget after that. and then your final vote on the budget will come in June. So outline for today, and I've kind of already gone through this, we're going to talk about a general fund financial update and the community disaster loan program, and then that follow-up from the last budget work session where we'll go over the APD and AFD financial numbers. We'll look at general compensation. We'll look at how all of those impact the tax rate for next year. And then finally, we'll talk about the CIP. And I'm probably going to go through this pretty quickly. We do have a lot to cover today, as Ms. Campbell indicated. And I know we covered some of this with you all last week when we gave you a preview. So just to start with on the financial side of things, just kind of a reminder of where we were when we last talked to you all a few weeks ago. If you look at that final column on the right there, we were at a budget gap for next year of about $11.4 million. We had gone through a process of looking at cost savings. The original numbers for next year, which is that middle column, initially had us at about a almost a $16 million gap, but we had done some cost savings, and we showed you all that list of cost savings, which totaled about $4.4 million, and that was able to bring, made it able for us to bring the gap down to about $11 million. And that's where we left off. We showed you all that would bring our fund balance down under our 15% policy goal. So we also showed you all what a tax rate increase would look like for next year to keep us at that 15%. And that was a tax rate increase of about 4.65 cents. And again, that's just kind of a recap of where we were to kind of give you all a starting point for today's discussion. So since then, as I mentioned, we have done some updates to our general fund revenues. We have been able to increase overall revenue estimates by just under $1 million. A couple things we want to highlight to you all today. The city does something called a cost allocation plan every year where we look at the enterprise funds and we look at the general fund services that are provided to enterprise funds, and we determine how much to charge those funds each year. Our consultants just completed that report this year, and the result of that showed that we could increase the transfers from the enterprise funds to the general fund by about $500,000 for next year beyond what we had initially estimated. So that's additional revenue for our general fund budget. We've also looked at the street cut fund. That's one of our enterprise funds. It's accumulated a fund balance over the last couple of years, and some of that fund balance is due to permit fee revenue, which after we've looked at that and had legal review of it, that revenue is not required to stay in the utility cut fund, even though it's an enterprise fund. So we're going to recommend that we transfer somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 from the street cut fund reserves to the general fund next year. Again, additional revenue for the general fund. And we've made a few other minor updates as well. On the expenditure side of the budget, we've looked at a number of things. We're going to recommend two to you all. One is to utilize some of our opioid settlement money to fund some additional staff next year in the fire department. We currently use our opioid settlement money along with a grant from Dogwood to fund 3 staff members and some of their associated operating costs. We've done a kind of a multi-year look at this because we will continue to get opioid settlement money for the next several years. So we looked at this over a multi-year period and determined that we could fund 2 additional firefighter positions that are currently on the community responder teams utilizing this opioid money, both in fiscal year 26 and likely in fiscal year 27 as well. So shifting those costs out of the general fund over to the opioid fund will save us about $170,000 next year. The second thing we want to highlight to you all, we've adjusted some of our vacancy assumptions for next fiscal year. You all actually requested some information from us at your last work session about our vacancies. As we were compiling that report and kind of looking at where we're at and doing some projections for next year, we were able to up our vacancy savings estimate for next year. It added savings of about $328,000 in the general fund. And again, we've added that to the money, the opioid option that I just showed you all, and so that creates total savings in the general fund of about $500,000. Just as a reminder that both of these recommendations on the expenditure side are one time, so they're really short-term savings strategies, and so we will have to, again, increase expenses in future years, but we can put these in place for next fiscal year. So where does that leave us in terms of the math? So as I mentioned, we were at a gap of about $11.4 million. That's that middle column. After the updates that I just mentioned to you, we increased revenues by about $900,000. We decreased expenses by about $500,000. So we've been able to narrow that gap to about $10 million, which would put us at 10.4% fund balance. So again, under our 15% goal, but we've been able to narrow that gap just a little bit. So we wanted to show you all, based on this update, kind of where that would leave us in terms of a required tax rate increase. That top line is what I showed you all a few slides ago, where we left off last time at a 4.65 cent tax rate increase. We've now been able to decrease that likely tax increase to 4 cents even. And we're going to show you all some additional numbers as we go through as well to update that. So I'll pause there and just see if you all have any questions or comments about the revenue and expense updates. If not, I'll move on.
I do have one question, and we've talked about it in previous cycles. For the strategic partnership grants, because we're pausing those in this budget cycle, have we alerted any previous awardees that might have received a multi-year contract?
I don't think that we have.
No, we haven't yet. Obviously, we're not through the budget process. So, and I'm not aware of anything that would get a multi-year. We fund those on an annual basis, so none of those contracts should go beyond one fiscal year.
Yeah, I was reminded that the last cycle, we were asking folks to apply for, essentially on their side, a multi-year. On our side, we can't necessarily do a multi-year. But I think there was an expectation there, so they may be finding out this way, and we might want to get in front of that, would be my suggestion.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so just to kind of quickly go over this community disaster loan program. So this is a program that's offered through FEMA, and it provides funding to help local governments that have incurred a significant loss due to a major disaster. And that significant loss has to adversely affect our ability to keep providing essential municipal services. So the loan funds can be used for pretty much any local government service. It can be used to continue or expand those existing services to meet disaster-related needs. It is a loan. It's a loan that will require payback over either a 5 or 10 year period if it's not forgiven by congressional action, which is a possibility. These types of loans have been forgiven in the past by Congress, but if not, the city will have to pay interest on the loan based on current interest rates as determined by FEMA. So staff has been working, finance staff has over the last few months with FEMA on the city's application. I think we first put in our application a couple months ago. We finalized the work with them earlier this week. We have not gotten final notification yet, though, from them about our potential award. We hope to hear from them in the next several weeks. The preliminary analysis, the analysts we were working with indicated that we may be eligible for up to $5 million, which is the maximum loan amount that's allowable under this program. We also took a look at if we did get the loan and we did have to pay it back, what current interest rates might be for that, and those are slightly over 4%, which means, again, if this loan were not forgiven by Congress, we would end up paying interest costs of somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million over the length of the payback, depending on whether that's a 5 or 10 year payback period. And then lastly, just a reminder that this, if we do get the award, this will require council approval, so we would be coming back to you all at one of your formal meetings to get approval for this. But we did want to kind of talk to you all a little bit today about some of the options and opportunities for utilizing funding from this community disaster loan program. So we put 3 on this slide. One obviously would be to apply the money toward our general fund revenue loss. And this would allow us to reduce the property tax rate increase that I showed you all on the prior slide for next fiscal year. We do have a couple of things in the enterprise funds that we wanted to point out. As you all know, there was some fairly significant revenue loss in the water fund earlier this year for the couple of months that we did not provide service. We do have some debt covenants in place that require the city to maintain revenue at a certain level above expenses in the water fund. And so utilizing some of the revenue there might be something we would want to consider. And then also we lost some revenue in the parking fund this year. And the reason that's significant is that The parking fund does fund or partly fund the transit fund with a transfer, and so if the parking fund does not make enough money, then we would not be able to make that transfer to transit. The one thing we wanted to highlight about those last two bullet points is there's still a lot of unknowns, even though we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. So the financial picture, both in water and parking, will likely not be known fully until closer to the end of the fiscal year. We are looking at other ways to offset the revenue losses in those two funds. And so there is opportunities there as well, perhaps to utilize or to come up with other ways to offset that revenue other than utilizing the community disaster loan funding. So just some pros and cons again with the CDL program. The revenue could be used to either minimize the property tax rate increase or ensure sufficient revenues in the enterprise fund. So it's an opportunity to use this money for revenue replacement. It is a loan, as I mentioned earlier, with an interest rate, so it would cost the city more in the long run unless Congress takes action to make it forgivable, as it has in some previous disasters. And then finally, it is a one-time revenue source. So if we do utilize it in the general fund this year, it would not alleviate the need for a property tax rate increase in the following fiscal year. So just to kind of finish up with this part of the presentation, wanted to show you all this chart again and update it to show you what it would look like if we received this loan, this $5 million loan, and we applied it to the general fund next year. We could lower the potential tax rate increase down to 1.5 cents. That would be about $53 a year for the average residential taxpayer in Asheville. So I think that completes my part of the presentation. Again, we just want to remind you all, we expect to receive notification on the disaster loan application in the next few weeks. So there's no council direction needed currently, but happy to answer any questions about anything I've shared so far. Okay, I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay for the rest of the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Oh, let's get to the fun stuff. All right, so when we came to you 2 weeks ago, we talked about compensation for public safety and for general employees, and so there were some questions that came out of that meeting that we're going to try to answer here today, and also there's been some movement, mostly on the public safety side, that we're going to discuss with you as well, so we can get and then we're going to show you what that looks like in terms of tax rate implications. So jumping into public safety, so just a recap of what we discussed before. Police is proposing a plan to move away from their current step pay plan and onto a structure that includes more of a career ladder. So that will be a cost of $1.1 million in next year's budget, and that's to make some adjustments for compression that it currently exists in police. We are also reviewing 2 proposals related to the fire department. One is similar to police. It's a move away from their step pay plan and towards more of a career ladder. And the other is the implementation of a 4th shift that will allow for each firefighter to work fewer hours, and we'll show you some details on that. And we're going to show you the costs for both of those over the next few years. But just to let you all know kind of where we're sitting right now, right after conversations that we've had with the department and with the Firefighters Association, we are developing, we're looking more towards the 4th shift proposal, and in favor of that over the transition away from the step pay plan. So we'll go into some details about that. And we're also gonna have a discussion about a compromise and what different options for moving to the 4th shift might look like. So starting with police, during our last conversation, we had gotten a request from y'all to look at 5-year projections for that. So as I mentioned, there's that pretty high increase of $1.1 million in the first year to adjust for compression, but then in the out years, you can see there's a much smaller cost there, and that's associated with basically officers being eligible to move up into a new position. And it's about 10 to 30 officers per year. It kind of fluctuates per year who might be eligible to get an increase. And these are obviously very preliminary estimates and subject to change, just to note that. So here's the fire pay plan and what that might look like over the next 5 years. Again, very preliminary, but we're not expecting the same level of compression that police has, so there's not significant cost in the first year, but there is a cost of about $700 per year after that, and that's due to the way that their new pay plan would be set up is everyone would be at least eligible to receive a 2 to 5% increase, depending on if they meet certain certifications. So that's what's driving that cost in the out years there.
And Lindsay, if I could add, before you go to the fourth shift proposal, we still strongly believe that we need to transition from a step plan to a more understandable pay plan for fire. It is just, can we do both this year? And we asked the firefighters and the association what's reasonable for this year, and they elected and supported some implementation of the fourth shift proposal, but we will still be continuing to work on this pay plan because it is extremely, we feel, important to have both public safety departments on a similar pay plan as the rest of the employee base.
Thank you, that's a good point. So, moving on to the fourth shift proposal, we have a bit more information from the last time we came to you. So the Firefighters Association has proposed this plan of adding a fourth shift, and basically the end result would be that each firefighter would work fewer hours while overall across the city maintaining the same level of service. So the full implementation of the plan would be phased over the next 5 years, next year, and then 5 years after that. And so if it's approved, basically the first year, which would be next fiscal year, would be where we establish the fourth shift, and there's about a $200,000 cost associated with that, and that's mostly for promotions of making people, like, making sure there's enough supervisory folks to cover that new shift. And that first year, sorry, just to add, the first year where that would cost the $200,000, firefighters would work the same number of hours during that year. I'll kind of show you what this looks like. There's a chart later. So the way that it works in the subsequent years is fire would phase in hiring more people every year, and each time you add a new firefighter, it decreases the number of hours that the existing firefighters need to work. And so in total, the proposal from the association adds 86 firefighters. Again, over the course, the full implementation as given to us would be over 5 years. And so at the end of that time, each firefighter would achieve a 42-hour work week, as opposed to the 56 hours that they work currently. And this total implementation cost is about $6.3 million over the next 6 years. And it is quite a chunk of change, so we're just noting here for awareness that that would probably require a property tax rate increase in the future as we start to bring on new firefighters. So here is kind of what it looks like. So next year, which is what we're really, voting on here, not today, we're not voting on it today, but we will be, is the $205,000 for the promotions. And then you can see starting in FY27, for the next 5 years, there's more firefighters added each year, and there's a little bit of equipment costs and some promotions associated with that as well. And so eventually you get to the point where there's 86 new firefighters, and each firefighter works 42 hours, and it costs a total of $6.3 million. And we added a row here for potential tax rate increase, and that's based on our current property values. And so total would be about a 3.1 cent tax rate increase.
But over,
Right,
I mean, that's
over
not
the
quite-
course of 6
yeah,
years, so, yeah.
Does this reflect what would, I guess, change about overtime if everyone was only working 42 hours? Isn't there a significant amount of money invested in overtime annually? And then this would make that, I'm just curious how big that number is.
You're saying, does it,
Or maybe it's in there.
I think it's, so I think what's baked in here is the cost of, this is the cost of the salary and benefits that it would take to get to that. Yeah, I don't think that there would be a significant change in overtime based on this plan.
I guess there was something about, don't they get a regular, I can look it up later. I guess I thought they got an automatic number of hours per pay period of overtime, and then moving to a 42 would alleviate that?
I think it's probably too preliminary at this point to
Okay.
assume that there would be any change in overtime at this point.
Okay.
I think the idea would be initially that the current staff would pick up the fourth shift, right? So you'd get an overtime.
So then they would still be meeting, they'd be still doing overtime with that extra shift.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Do,
And
do,
we do have someone that might be able to answer that directly.
so if there's someone who knows and they're
Chooses
making their way up here, that'd be great. But while that's happening, is there any cost, like if you do 4 shifts, does that mean that then no one is sleeping on shift? And are there cost savings of eliminating like the beds and, does it change anything about that?
The fourth shift would be the same design as the current shift, so you would just spread it out to 4 days instead of 3 days worth of work. So there would be the same requirement, the same amount of bed space, same amount of locker space, same amount of kitchen space, same amount of living space essentially. It's just spread out between 4 shifts now.
And that
And
was
the-
part of the questions that we asked as well,
You asked.
Mayor, to try to figure out.
In the never-ending
complicated.
confusion of trying to understand the firefighter shift world, and I bet we won't accomplish it here, but what, can you bottom line, like this is a lot of money. What's good about this versus what we currently do based on what you just said about you just work up forth? I didn't really get that.
So one of the biggest pluses of this is the industry standard in the fire service is to go to this fourth shift. And the city of Asheville is going to have a really hard time getting people here if our nearby communities start adopting this shift.
Okay.
We've actually had a couple communities nearby adopt this shift. We've lost firefighters already to these other communities as well.
And what is it that a firefighter, what is it that they like so much about the 4th shift versus the 3-shift system?
I think currently it's their schedule. So they'll work 1 shift on, and they'll go home for a day, and they'll come right back. This 4th shift allows them to have extended time off before they come back. So the 4th shift, there's 3 or 4 different options for scheduling, but all of them give them more time at home and less hours here by doing that.
So it's sort of like whether it costs your city more or less, it's kind of turning into the industry norm, and if you want to stay competitive, you're going to need to.
Yeah, I'm going to be very concerned about being able to fill our rosters out if we don't stay
Because
competitive.
currently we have 1 vacancy and we want to keep it that way. According to the
Yeah,
sheet, which is
absolutely.
possible.
Yes.
What other
And that's a
cities-
non-uniform vacancy.
What other cities in North Carolina have already gone to this?
So I'll leave that.
Yeah. If the industry is trending here, tell me where we are in the bell curve.
Sure, good to see y'all again. Never thought I'd be right here again.
It's nice to see you.
So as far as,
Scott, can you state your name?
yeah, sorry, Scott Burnett, retired fire chief. So,
From here.
from here, City of Asheville, retired fire chief. So Greenville, North Carolina is probably the next largest municipality. They're about half Asheville size. They're about halfway into their plan. And there's some smaller communities. Waynesville is the closest. And I believe that's who we've lost firefighters to already is to Waynesville. Waynesville's fully implemented, working 4 shifts. Town of Mills River is transitioning to that, and it's a conversation statewide. Nationwide, the Northeast has worked 4 shifts for quite some time. The Northwest, Washington, Oregon, that area is rapidly moving. Most departments have already moved to that. We've lost a firefighter as well for that 4th shift to the Northwest. Florida is rapidly moving, and when departments move to that 4th shift, all of the departments around it for the purpose of recruitment or retention are moving that direction. Charlotte obviously is our closest competitor for firefighters, Charlotte has a distinct advantage than the city of Asheville in that they are already having their firefighters work less hours. They use a Kelly Day system where they give every firefighter a 24-hour day off every single month already. They can utilize that tool and move to a fourth shift with a much less fiscal impact than the city of Asheville. And so I think that if Charlotte, and you know, obviously whether or not that would happen is unknown, but if Charlotte were to go to that, I think that would be devastating for recruitment and retention in Asheville, because that would be the next large municipality that we always compete for firefighters with. So.
And there was also conversations around the term that they use, consistency of local government employees. There's a difference between the number of hours that everyone else works versus a firefighter. Firefighters work longer hours, and that it just is, because they're doing 24-hour shifts. You may want to speak to that.
Yes, ma'am. So Mayor, you said exactly the very confusing structure of firefighter schedules, hourly rates. I know that I've been standing here, and y'all have too, talking about firefighter hourly rates for at least 10 years. And so that confusion goes away when you normalize it, because the difference is the number of hours worked. And so with a 40% more hours worked right now that firefighters work over all other city employees, that's the difference. And so it normalizes that. It creates the confusion. It eliminates the confusion, the long cycles. Firefighters are paid in a 28-day cycle, very unique from all other city employees. That causes overpayments, it causes underpayments, which requires city staff to have a lot of time invested in that, and it has a lot of stress for the employee as well. And so a huge benefit, obviously, is just moving the needle to where firefighters are working the same number of hours as other city employees.
That context of what's happening in our neighboring departments and across the state is so helpful. Thank you for coming to work with our staff on these recommendations. I am curious, right now, my understanding is that our firefighters would be among the city employees receiving that 3% hybrid increase. Have we looked at what it would take and which parts are possible to implement some of the FY27 parts this year? Because I'm really worried about recruiting, but also retaining our staff that just gained a lot of skills on disaster recovery. And if there's parts of that that we could move forward while retaining their cost of living adjustment, I'd be interested to know what that looks like.
And the addition of FTEs would be just that. That would be the cost. But absolutely, the FTEs could be added with that cost of living increase as well. It's just obviously those additional resources would be additional funds. And so
have we had a chance to look at what a hybrid of this and pulling some of those recommendations in looks like?
We have a recommendation that we'll be getting to shortly, but if you're saying different from what's contained in the presentation, we haven't.
Okay. I, for one, would like to look and see if we need to do some recruitment or retention strategies to bring in some of the fiscal year 27 over. That's speaking for myself.
Into this budget cycle.
Correct.
Or upcoming.
I don't think I'm not totally up to speed on what's happening. Do you, I'm not exactly sure what you're requesting, but you're about to give us a recommendation, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Tony's gonna jump up, okay.
I think I understand the question. I think, if you look at the FY27 column, right, so the proposal from the Fire Association included the addition of 14 FTEs. So we've got the 3% increase for a FTE built into the numbers that Lindsay's going to show you. So if we do something above and beyond that, I wanted to do, for example, the full 14, let's say next year, that would be about $1 million, and that would be another half cent on the tax rate. Does that help answer your question?
If that's the part, if it's the only part that pulls over, but if there were other sections of it that could be broken out would also be helpful, so we have some options.
Tony, I think she's saying, there's a proposal for 14, right? She's saying, is it, I think,
Like an on-ramp
is
to
it
the highway.
possible to do two in 26?
Add another $1 million this year.
Yeah, and that is actually, that's absolutely a compromise that we're going to come to in a few slides. I'll sit down and let the presentation go on. All right.
said it was gonna be exciting.
It did. That was right. All right, so a lot of this was just covered by our colleagues, so I'll just go through the pros very quickly. One pro is that if you have more firefighters, you have more people who are trained and available to respond if there should ever be a future disaster event such as Helene. Also, if each firefighter is working fewer hours, then each firefighter would be exposed less to the harmful carcinogens that they breathe when they are responding to fires and get smoke inhalation. Want to mention that currently, as the mayor mentioned, there is not a recruitment and retention issue. We are fully staffed in the fire department with the exception of the one non-uniformed staff member. But if there were potentially to be issues in the future, this would help with those issues. And the last pro we'll list here is that the hourly rate of each firefighter would be higher because, again, they'd be working fewer hours. But then that kind of leads to the first con on this slide. So it increases their hourly pay, but it does not increase their annual salary. So their annual salary stays the same. Again, that's already above the Just Economics full living wage that we've been speaking to you all about. We also, as I mentioned, would be unable to absorb the full 86 firefighters with our existing resources, so it would probably require future property tax rate increases as we add more firefighters to the force. I think a big question is why it's important to do this now. There is quite a bit of fiscal uncertainty due to the storm. We are talking about taking out a loan for that reason. And obviously we're also facing a lot of uncertainty and policy changes on the federal level that could have a large impact on our costs in the next year. And lastly, I think we wanted to mention that approving this plan is going to potentially crowd out needs from other departments and create issues there, including morale issues with other staff. All right, so yesterday, some staff met with the Firefighter Association leadership and the department leadership to discuss this proposal. And so the compromise approach that we came to is to, this year, put in place that structure of that fourth shift. Again, this is a recommendation. It would be to spend the $205,000 next year to put in place that fourth shift. And then we would recommend future council next year in the FY27 budget process to add 4 to 5 additional firefighters just to start that process of getting the new firefighters on board. And I think the way that it's been spoken to us about this plan is that every firefighter you add adds a benefit. So this kind of allows future council and future staff to work together to figure out what's the right pace of implementation of this program of adding 86 total firefighters based on what our resources are at the time when we're having the discussions.
And we really think that there is possibly a way even to whittle down that 86 number down even further. We also discussed that this really is transformational for this community, and this is a long-term kind of a proposal. If by chance you get a windfall of appreciation in terms of property values, all those things in terms of resources that are needed, heck yeah, your implementation can be much faster. But this is a lot, and it impacts the entire organization. There are lots of needs within other departments, but we do not want to minimize we think the positive benefit of this fourth shift in terms of morale, in terms of exposure from a health perspective, and as you've heard from the former chief, normalizing the work schedule, the pay schedule, the vacation accrual schedule. There are a lot of benefits to go into this fourth shift. Our concern, again, was why now, and then the cost of implementation. And we think it should be incremental, slow, and steady.
I agree with that approach. Does anyone know the implementation time period for these other cities that adopted it? Are they doing 5 years, 10 years?
Can we let?
Or more like ad hoc, like we're talking about?
And one that's more our size, not a, 20-person fire department, but
Yeah, so Greenville is about half of our size. They have about 150. And that's the closest one in North Carolina to our size, and they're doing a 4-year plan. Yeah, they're halfway through that, so.
I have a similar reaction to you, Deborah. It's a great plan. I love it for what it means for the firefighters in general and for the community, but the pace is concerning.
We agree. But
Just
we
for-
do,
just from
we
a
do think
finance-
this is reasonable.
Just from a finance.
yeah,
world,
yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like a necessary move. I am no expert in how to do this, so I defer to the experts, and luckily we've got several, so that's good. It's more just a matter of the fiscal impact and managing the fiscal impact on the cities and the taxpayers.
That's good.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Campbell touched on a lot of these pros and cons. These are just the pros and cons of our compromised proposal. We are putting in place a structure that we can build on in the future. It's more financially sustainable than the full implementation. But again, as you all mentioned, it slows the benefits of adding the fourth shift, and it will still have the effect of creating a morale issue for the rest of staff and preventing other needs from being considered.
Could you just elaborate on that point?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about that too.
Well, I think, this year we're concerned about our tax rate increase, right? We're trying to whittle that down as much as possible because we want to limit the impact to the community. So if we are talking about adding to the tax rate every year to add more firefighters, are we gonna also want to consider other departments' needs that also might raise the tax rate? I think that's kind of what we're saying is if we're already talking about the need to raise the tax rate every year for this, are we gonna have space to do other things?
So, yeah, and generally, if you all can remember, over the past 5 years, how many actual additional full-time equivalent staff people have we added? It's been about 10. And so we're saying this pace for our community is it's significant. To add 14 just in fire, so then, what about water? What about all of these other departments? I think
Okay.
that's what that is referring to.
I would
It's a
also-
good compromise, though. I mean, recognizing that we should move in that direction is a good step, right? Starting the plan, knowing we can't leap. I don't know that we can do what Kim was saying, do the whole million, but I appreciate staff's approach of, this council will be the same next budget cycle. After that, we don't know.
Well, let me ask a question. So I don't understand the sequencing. So if we start adding, say, next year we add 14, or we do an accelerated, are we moving to a fourth shift and then we just use current staff to make up the fourth shift? Okay,
Yes,
so
correct.
everybody's
Yeah.
nodding, so I got that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if, that, and then, well, everyone will make a lot more money because they're gonna be covering the additional shift, which
Well,
I.
no, not really.
Mayor, the way it would work is we would take the current available number of people, and instead of spreading them out over 3 shifts, we would spread them out over 4 shifts. And then,
So some people would make less money.
no, they would make the same amount of money, because what we would do is they still work the same amount of hours, but because it's over 4 shifts, they're scheduled for less. But what we'll do is they would do what we're calling a debit day. So they would owe us a day, and those days that they owed us would fill out the balance between what was left when we put them over 4 shifts. So let's just say we need 100 people on each shift. We don't, but if we needed 100 people on each shift, and when we balanced it out, that puts 75 on each shift. Then we'd have 25 open spots that the shifts that aren't working would have to fill to complete that. those fill-in days end up, it's the same amount of hours a year we still have to work, so it's the same amount, it's still 29.12, because we're just taking them off of different shifts and saying, now today you work this shift to make up the difference. Then, every time we add people, then there's one less debit day that they would have to work. So those days they work, the debit days are not overtime, it's part, it's.
I did not, I did not
It
get that.
is,
I know.
I don't understand.
confusing.
It just, yeah, I mean, because you're
I get
still,
it.
you still gotta cover all the shifts.
They're doing these
Yes.
debit days, that's the difference, and whether or not they pick up one debit day or 4 debit days is what we're talking about.
Correct. So
And
the-
slowly adding more people to reduce the number of these
Reduce
debit
the
days they
debit
have to
days,
pick
yeah.
up.
So, but you get paid for it.
The same.
Yes.
It's exactly.
The same.
It's
It's the same. So right now, it's switching the pay plan. You're moving from your 3 shifts a week to your 4 shifts and a debit day a month or something.
Or some-
One a month,
some form
one a
of debit
week,
day,
some,
yes.
it's not a week, so one a
Yes.
month. And then as more firefighters come on, you have less, you have more people to spread out, less debit days needed for individuals.
I'm Sage is gifted, understand HR, I do not share
It
this
took
gift.
me a
So,
good few weeks up.
I guess my only point is, you know, if we get into year FY '27 or '28 and we're like, we cannot afford to do the step this year, we
They
cannot,
keep the same
we
debit
can't-
days.
so.
That's
But
right.
I guess what I'm asking is, from a technical standpoint, could it, if we had to, could we delay implementation and the whole world wouldn't fall apart?
Absolutely, the economic environment should dictate that, yes.
So Mayor, that's why we are recommending that we kind of get an understanding generally of the structure, the rhythm. Right now, those numbers are somewhat theoretical, but once we, and the chief will be working on this in the next fiscal year, if this is adopted, that we would be trying to get an understanding of resource needs, what it takes to actually cover a 4th shift. So we'll have more real data than kind of theoretical. And they did a great job, but in terms of coming up with these recommendations, but we'll get closer to
Like
having
vehicles.
real data. It's almost like a pilot project
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
in the first year.
I see the first year, I don't know how to explain it any more clear, but I understand the sense of you're just filling different musical chair seats.
Yeah,
Um,
building the structure.
and therefore, at the end of the day, the take-home stays the same in year 1.
Correct.
Correct.
But year 5,
We've got to
You're
add.
working less,
We need
maybe.
to
Every-
add.
You're
every
still
year-
exposed to the
Gotta
same
add.
annual increase.
Every time you add people, then they have to work less debit days, which decreases their amount of hours per year they're actually working, which increases their base salary. And at a certain point, like in year 1, when you get down to 53 hours per week instead of 56, now you eliminate the built-in overtime that we have to pay as well. So
That's what I was
that first step actually eliminates some overtime costs for us.
I have a different question. Do we have an idea of how many of our firefighters, or what percentage of them, are new, say, in the last 5 years? Because when I hear stories about a truck going out to a structure fire that has almost entirely new staff, I'm really worried that we might not be telling the story to our community, that there's a life cost associated with not retaining people with experience.
Certainly, since I've been here, we actually run 2 recruit classes a year. Each one of those recruit classes has anywhere from 15-ish on average people in it, anywhere from 10 to 18, but 15 on average, and we probably graduate maybe 12 out of that. So we're adding about 24 to 25 firefighters a year, and it's not an addition, that's replacing retirements, resignations, people that go to other places to work, that kind of stuff.
So is it,
But we're fortunate that we don't have the same type of retention issues that a lot of other communities have,
Or that APD has.
Yet.
or that
Yeah.
APD has.
Yeah,
So-
that's a good point.
So, I mean, this is in lieu of the step plan, correct? Where this isn't
In lieu of the proposed pay plan.
of the pay plan, right? So that was roughly $700,000 maybe that we're saving. So I actually kind of share my colleagues, like, if we could, move this from a 5-year plan to a 4-year plan, I feel like we could implement this a little bit faster, and then if we needed to pause in the next couple of years, we'd be set up in a good position to do that if needed.
And please hear us clearly. Again, we would love to implement this because I believe in this fourth shift. But the fiscal impact of moving this up from 5 years to 4 years is
And
Well, I'm
maybe
over here
not
thinking about 10.
the whole
doubling.
14.
Yeah, I'm thinking about
I
10
think the
years.
problem is, though, we don't have the
It- we
money.
just
I
don't have
think
the
Bo
money.
was speaking to a more aggressive start. That's all I heard in
No,
Kim,
I
really.
thought you were
That
saying
first
that you
year
said-
was go ahead and get some staff hired too, is what
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
exactly.
To show good faith in the plan.
Yes,
That
and
we
we
do
can
the
get
4
some,
or 5 this
So
year.
what if it was something like the 205 for marketing, I guess you have to market it, but the cost
I
of
think it's
3 or 4 or
promotions.
5 people is, oh, it's promotions, I'm thinking
Yeah,
marketing
yeah.
it, like
No,
promoting it.
no, those are
So sorry.
promotions.
So what if adding 5 positions is $350,000, and you're saying maybe do that this year?
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Not on the highway, but on the on-ramp to get us moving. I think it could show good faith, but it was on a previous slide or a future slide, the potential of doing, it's slide 32. Fiscal year 27, 4 to 5 additional firefighter positions added to the budget in order to begin operationalizing the fourth shift. That's what I'm interested in.
So next year's 4 or 5, the 350,000.
But put it this year,
Right, that's what I heard too.
especially if we can.
We'd
I mean,
have
you
to
can
figure
put on
out
the
what
growing
that-
list of things we have to evaluate of adds and subtractions, I mean,
Exactly.
you could put it on the list and look at it. I mean, we are investing more in the APD step plan shift this year.
I have a question that's kind of out of this track, so I'm just gonna flag that in case anyone wants to get on this train before, okay. Let me see if I can pull the thoughts together. So we've been talking for multiple years about the hours that the fire department works is more than the average, more than any other city employee. And that the take-home results to a lower wage, a lower hourly wage, and that they have to work many more hours, and so, you know, the time they have with their family is less than someone else. Or the time they have available to work a second job, is all this stuff. And this fourth shift is a really different tack than the conversations we've been having in the past. The conversations we've been having in the past is raising wages, raising wages, raising wages. And it seems like when I went through the brief, the memo that former Chief Burnett prepared with others, that there was a sense of just getting the wages up wasn't financially reasonable or possible. And so I guess what I'm asking is this a more financially approachable method than just raising their wages? And I'm gonna say one more thing, and I ask that because while trying to reach this goal of having our firefighters feel the value that we feel in them by being paid what they need, I have an anxiety as the beginning of this year, seeing how we are economically and not having the data yet. I mean, I remember talking to you, I was like, are we gonna have to fire people this year? That's how scary this economic climate has been. And that's not the position we're in, I'm very thankful. However, I'm thinking about budget resiliency. And we have a very, very labor-heavy budget. And so that makes us less nimble when disasters hit or financial markets tank, right? Like, we don't have tons of fat to cut. We don't have, oh, we'll just defer $15 million. So the idea of making a long-term commitment to, I mean, we have what, 1,200 employees, so adding another 100 employees, that's a very, very substantial labor growth for an institution that doesn't have fat to cut, that in the last 5 years has gone through 2 major financial traumas. I'm holding that really big picture, like what is financial budget resiliency at the cost of adding more staff? And how do we get to this goal of having employees work the same amount of time so they can have full lives with their families or their hobbies or whatever they do? My sense is that this is a cheaper way to get to it, even though these numbers are like, oh, a little intense. But I guess you know how I kind of pull a bunch of big stuff together, so instead of leaving that out for anybody, Deborah, talk to me about that concern of growing number of staff. If the goal is to have people taken care of and paid better, is this a more financially prudent method, or just tell me what you're thinking as you hear my pieces out?
Sure. I think we're trying to accomplish some multiple goals. Council has said that they want to try to achieve living wages for most of our employees. We have some slides later on that'll talk about how we've adjusted that and gotten all but, I believe, 84. That would be living wage if this proposed budget were adopted. We also have the goal of health and wellness and quality of life and ensuring that firefighters have that opportunity. Let me go back to the living wage. The hourly rate increases because the number of hours worked decreases. The annual salary actually doesn't.
Right.
And so I don't know that it addresses that increase in pay. It's the same amount of money. The rate goes up again because they're working less hours. I think lastly, it is about a little bit about consistency and having close to 40 hours worked. I also think that the proposal before us, and while we think this compromise is good from both a fiscal and a financial, a health and wellness perspective, is we get closer to that long-term goal of reducing hours, increasing hourly rates, but in a fiscally responsible manner. Accelerating too fast, we believe, has significant fiscal and issues related to employee morale. I have to represent this entire organization and the needs and desires of every employee. And so, again, we try to get to a win-win where there would be some momentum, some progress, some commitment made to a fourth shift without compromising a lot of the other needs, and in particular, the impact on the property owner here, because a tax increase will be needed. It will be higher if we go too far with this proposal.
I have a question. Deborah, do you know, or have any insight into which would be more important, the 3% raise this year or moving a step in this direction? What if, is this plan, this changing of model so important that, if we can't afford to go, was that ever discussed?
So, I think certainly that is something that the association has probably had those conversations. One of the concerns I have with saying forego a 3% raise for that is not all of our firefighters are on shift. This only affects the firefighters who are on shift. We have a significant amount of firefighters that work during the day, that run our emergency management bureau, that run our fire marshal's office, and those other positions like that. So foregoing a 3% raise to get a fourth shift does not benefit.
Well, what about if it was just the folks impacted?
Well, then you
I
have
just
people
wonder
of the
if there's any-
same pay grade getting different pays, and one with a raise and one without. So there'd be a disparate impact there as well.
I mean, again, we work with the association, discuss with them, and the president said, Deborah, I wish we could do more. And I said, I wish we could do more as well. But again, we are
It's a good
fiscally
step, though.
constrained.
It's a step in the right direction, and this is when I was meeting with the firefighter association last year about the budget. This was what we ultimately took from the conversation. You know, we're addressing wages this year, but really the whole model needs to be shook up. So I'm glad we're at least moving in that direction. I don't know that we can do everything. I do support seeing an additional line item in these long lists of what we may add or may subtract to represent the 5 people that could be onboarded in this cycle at a cost of something, $350,000. I'd like to see it and weigh it next to everything else. I just support that.
We'll run some numbers.
I don't know if you had everybody's support, I was just sharing mine.
I would
Sorry.
support that. Also, I would also support, to your point, Deborah, I think we do want to look at making sure that we are equitable across the board, across staff. So, you know, if Parks and Rec need a couple more people, or they need some sort of equipment, or water department, I'd like to know what each department would like.
So what I'll say very quickly, Mayor, is that, you know, we went through an exercise of asking every department to see if there were areas that were wants. I really want this. We're in a fiscal environment and a budgetary cycle where we are dealing with needs, y'all. We're taking out loans. We're doing everything for us to try to reduce and meet multiple goals. And the goal of lessening the impact on the taxpayer has been a primary driver for us because we got that sense from you all. And trying to look at every program, every resource that we have in terms of revenue, how, you know, is this, let's turn over this rock, is there anything under the cushion? And so, and minimizing any kind of layoffs. That's the environment that we're in now. And so we've done our best. We will go back and with you all's direction, if you all want us to see if there's something else that could be shifted into this year for implementation. But I think, Mayor, I will need 4 people to tell me to do that.
I'm on the other side of things. Are we gonna, are we looking at increasing any revenue projections in light of sales tax revenue coming up? Because we just had new data, right? I don't want
There's
to,
4
they're
to 5 people in there.
To accelerate the plan.
Correct.
Okay,
I don't know that
I
I'm there.
mean, Deborah, we could sit up here and tell you all of our wish list. All of us, we get 4 people to tell you the wish list. You are the manager. You need to tell us whether we can actually
did.
afford to do this.
I just did.
Right. That's why I support seeing it on the
just did.
list, but not,
you've said, what I hear you saying is, this is gonna be really hard to do. I don't know that we can afford it. And
That's
we're
what I did.
telling you, do it anyway, right?
Right.
So when you come back to us and say, here's the property tax increase to do this, are we saying yes to that? Is that what we're saying yes to? Are we, I'm just trying to understand because the other thing I hear you saying, probably a little too subtly, is, hey, there's probably plans out there that are recommended for public works, so we can be competitive in the arena of public works, where we have a significant number of vacancies. We haven't heard that proposal, have we? I haven't heard that proposal. So I'm hearing the recommendation from leadership in the fire department say this is what you gotta do to be competitive, and I'm hearing that loud and clear, but I'm hearing we don't have the money to do that quite any more aggressively, and we're not really sure we have the money to do this. We're telling you what it's gonna cost year over year. So what are we telling Deborah to do?
I was suggesting we just put it on the list so that I can have a comprehensive.
We don't have.
I don't think we have
Oh,
four.
I thought you just said we had four.
No, I think she said, get your four, and I moved.
Oh.
Mayor, I need you
Okay.
to.
Sorry, I did not
That's
understand
okay.
what you're saying, and I
That's okay.
take back my, I'm like a little like, what are we doing? Good Lord, get the checkbook.
I can be confusing. Sure.
So, okay, but
So
I
it's-
don't take that to mean, mostly I'm worried that we're only on slide 35, actually, and we have 76 slides. Who put this together?
We still
Okay.
have capital.
Jake
is waiting patiently.
Jake can run through those very.
I just want to say one more thing on this, because I feel like I want to jump in and be like, I'm the fourth. Like,
Wait, what,
people-
fourth for what though?
I don't know, I wasn't even saying I was signaling my
Here-
support, I was saying I
here's-
want to see it on the list.
You're just like to-do list.
can I
Yeah,
finish
the
my
whole
statement,
map.
friends?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. I want to go faster too. I would love that. That would be delightful. And I'm getting emails about people losing their damn jobs at home. Like, open up the Citizen Times today. How many businesses have closed? I want to do that, especially because amazing employees are in the room right now, and I believe in you. But there's a lot of people that aren't in the room right now that are, we just had a natural disaster. I'm very uncomfortable about the amount of taxes we're already talking about having. I feel like I'm saying we can't have ice cream, and I want it too. But I'm very, very concerned about the state of our economy right now. And I want to give everybody what they deserve. But I need to absorb the reality of the ask to all of our neighbors and property owners that we're even thinking of right now with increased taxes. And I just need to do some more absorption for myself. So I feel like I needed to say that.
I appreciate that, and I'm really just looking for summary. If you're gonna ask me for 1.1 million for this department, that, I'm just looking for the big list. I wasn't necessarily signaling I support it this year, I don't know that we can afford it. I am curious if we have any other revenue updates coming in on the other side. Like, I know that we had new reports coming in for sales tax ticking up again. Are we still at the same projections as we started with in the very beginning?
That's correct, yeah, we don't have any additional info.
So the vice mayor made a good point that on the slide that you just moved away from, the firefighters themselves are not recommending that we start doing this until next year. So why don't we go with what
Let's
they're.
go steady.
Let's go with what they're asking for and move on. What slide number are you up to?
Yeah, I
I
think
can
we're clear on that.
appreciate that the organizers of the employees, the unions and the employees themselves, their point of view is to advocate as hard as they can for themselves. And so would they, the opportunity to go faster, I would suspect would be a desire of theirs. And our role is to listen to all the different advocates and balance them within the needs of the budget and the folks who aren't advocating and the property taxpayers and all this stuff. So I don't know that I would say like we're getting jump for joy cheers from our firefighters here, but I do hear that we're not doing nothing, that we're moving in a direction that's much better than a status quo. And that going faster would of course be desirable. But again, I'm not elected to be an advocate. I feel like I'm here to listen to all the different folks coming together and try and find ways to piece it together to have a whole budget that's responsible.
All right, I will not interrupt you again. You can roll.
I will fly through the rest of this. All right, so let's move away from public safety and we'll talk about the employees on the general pay plan. Okay, so right now, we showed you the slide before. It shows all of the folks that we have that make below the full living wage as calculated by Just Economics, which is that 48,152 in the last column. Right now, there's 181 folks that are below that wage. However, 30 of them are fire and police trainees, so once they graduate from their respective academies, they will be moved out of that column entirely. So really, we're talking about 151 folks that are below that salary. Last time we spoke, we talked about these different potential options for increasing salaries. We talked about the percentage model, and the hybrid model. So percentage is where every employee would get a percentage increase to their salary across the board. The hybrid option is where if you're above the median salary, you get that percentage increase, but if you're below the median salary, you get a flat rate that's equal to a percentage of the median salary. So the bottom line for that is that you would increase people at the bottom a little bit more than the people at the top. That's the benefit of the hybrid scenario. I'll also note here that if we do go with the hybrid model for fire specifically, it would be just the percentage, just because they have a lot of compression issues. So I just wanted to make that clear and transparent for everyone. Here are the costs of those plans, and these numbers are slightly bigger than what we showed you last time, and that's because we've added the cost of the fourth shift, that $200,000. So this includes percentage increase for regular employees, police pay plan, and the fire fourth shift. A question that came up during our last meeting was how all of these different scenarios fared if you look at how many people get moved above that living wage. And so you can see here, we took a look at the numbers. Currently, there's 151 people. That's what I showed you on the previous slide. The 3% hybrid option would move the most people out of that wage range. There would only be 84 people below 48,152. I will note for transparency that there could be folks hired after July 1st that would come in below that salary as their starting wage, but just wanted to note that. All right, so here is the tax rate increase that we would be looking at potentially for all these scenarios. So this slide shows the salary increases, the APD pay plan, the AFD fourth shift, 15% fund balance, and that's it. That's what it shows. So you can see here, depending on how much of a percentage increase you want to give, it's basically between 5 and 6 cents on the tax rate. And you can see the impact to the average homeowner there as well. Now, Tony showed you before the information about the loan, and so here's what that looks like if we get the loan and if we apply the loan to fill in this gap. It would be a tax rate increase of 2.6 to 3.3 cents, depending on how much you want to do for employees. All right. Any questions on general employee compensation before we move to capital?
Yeah, so we need to kind of weigh in on our direction so you guys can do all the detailed work to prepare a manager's budget, yes?
Yeah, and as you can see, staff's recommendation, we recommend the hybrid if we're trying to move folks closer to that, more people to that living wage. We would only have 84 people that wouldn't be employees, that wouldn't be at that rate. From 181. 151.
Yeah.
I guess I'll share that I'm just, I remain conflicted and concerned, similar to Maggie, about the economic impacts in our community and raising taxes at all. I realize that's not the direction that we are putting forth and you're asking for input on. So for me, I'm having to see the big picture. I'm concerned. I think that there's a majority support for the 3% hybrid at this dais. I would like to think that I will get to a place that supports that. And I appreciate in each of the work sessions I've had with staff, there's been extensive work to make cuts, find money, overturn every rock. Maybe some more will come up. Maybe some more sales tax revenues will be able to be realized. I think we might even be able to increase our projections. So I'm getting there. So I sense that's the direction to keep moving. Will I be able to support it all in the end? I just don't know until I see it all.
When you say see it all, do you mean,
The overall impact, so we've got.
this, we
yeah.
have this, do you mean this might change or something as we get closer?
It could. It sounds like Deborah was talking about turning more stones. There could be more improvements to sales tax
Move it to
revenue
With
Yeah,
the
one with
loan.
the loan.
with the loan. There you go, yeah.
So with
So the $10 a month is what we're essentially signaling to staff to move forward.
do we, on the timing on the loan, what is the timing on the loan? Like, will we know, I guess is what.
I think we're anticipating a few weeks before we hear back at the minimum, but as far as we know, we've answered all their questions, and so we're just waiting for a final.
So hopefully we'll be able to, I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't take this loan when 98% of them are forgiven by Congress. We would be, I know,
It's still Asheville.
it's still Congress. I mean,
Yeah.
It's still Congress versus Asheville.
so, no, it's not, that's not how it works, though. I don't think they cherry pick cities. They just, yeah, it's, Brad is giving an across-the-board hand signal, because they just, and we'll recall, in the December package passed by Congress, it was over $100 billion for multiple jurisdictions. So and within Western North Carolina, we would not be the only municipality taking this loan. I assume other cities and counties in Western North Carolina are going to try to take advantage of this as well. Actually makes a bigger difference for them relative to their budget sizes. So I don't know that there's a lot of risk in saying yes to this.
And there just aren't a lot of other programs or opportunities for cost recovery. I mean,
This is pretty much it.
this is
For
pretty much it.
losses experienced by a
During the-
governmental entity. This is the program they have. Unfortunately, it was created a long time ago, and it was capped at $5 million. So I would be hopeful that we would actually be looking at this scenario, unless somebody has some information.
One of the other pieces of information I requested, I think we're going to get in a follow-up to today, is I requested the fund balances for all the enterprise funds, just on the off chance that some of them are a
Like we could
robust
rate-
savings
rate
that could
from
help offset some costs this year. I'm just trying to, turn over every stone.
Our
think
our
I had-
policy
This is
on,
included in this, right? Part of the cost savings that you found over the last several weeks was
Yeah.
excess from one of them.
Enterprise exchange
Essentially,
funding in general fund, yeah, this is different.
I'm working on
Yeah.
that before the meeting today. So one thing I would just say about enterprise fund balance is, in most cases, unlike street cut, where we identify the specific revenue that could be transferred to general fund, in most cases, even if there is fund balance in those funds,
Can't
we
use it.
can't utilize it in the general fund. So for example, water, stormwater, we can't utilize those monies in the general fund. So the opportunity there, we're getting the data pulled together, but there's really no opportunity beyond what we've already identified to move money from enterprise to general fund.
So there's
unfortunately.
nothing in our general fund spending that is supplementing some of these enterprise funds that could be using their savings.
So, I mean, we do, the general fund subsidizes transit and Harrah's. However, that general fund money is needed to balance those budgets for
budgets,
next
yeah.
year. Yeah.
And they don't have the fund balance to,
So Harrah's does have some fund balance, but it's been generally set aside for capital improvements. I mean, that could be a conversation we could have about not utilizing that. In transit, it's a little more complicated, because in their fund balance, it's a mix of federal revenues, motor vehicle license fee, and so there's some restricted dollars there. So I would be
yeah.
really hesitant to move any money out of transit or utilize it to replace that general fund transfer.
Thank you.
And like we said, we've done a lot of due diligence, even checking with the city attorney's office to say, is this legal to do this? So that, I mean, again, that's just where we are in terms of revenue. What I keep telling you all is it's about additional revenue. And I know we just got to figure out how to generate, like support for transit, have some sales tax. Sorry.
just get the county to.
Help us out.
No,
Well,
but I do have an ongoing curiosity in the future of expanding, whether it's an ACM or department, something around more economic development, grant generation. Like when we start talking about performing arts centers, and we start talking about rebuilding the River Arts District, and who's gonna champion that stuff, Like when the tourist stadium came to us, we had to kind of shuffle. And like when these things happen, will we have the right people in place? I know we've had, fluctuating conversations about that, but I hope it's in our future planning.
You didn't get any more direction. Okay, Sage said her thing. So are we, one issue around, I'm supportive of the 3%, but one issue around the impact for this year, if we take the loan, is we're kind of kicking the can because the loan is one-time money. So we will see that recurring expense. Now, next year is a reval year, but it's also a year where we've got to absorb the bond fiscal impact, and that was estimated at 2.3 cents, something like that, yeah. So just to keep in mind, you know, but however, we, you know, hopefully we'll see some storm recovery. And we'll shop a lot or something between now and then, and our sales tax revenue will be higher, I don't know, but, okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Jade Dundas, interim assistant city manager. I'm gonna do my best to get through this as quickly as possible and give you all the much needed break. Key takeaways, we're working toward a 10-year capital improvement plan. We feel like that's the best for the long-term vision and to be able to really support some bigger projects in the future. Due to the hurricane, we had to settle on a well-developed and thorough 5-year CIP, which you'll see published in the proposed budgets that will come out. I'm going to highlight on the first 2 years, or 26 primarily, and then update on the bond and what the activities we've done thus far. And then important to consider recovery projects in the context of bond and general fund CIP projects. We understand that there are adjacencies to these projects and that we can't complete one without consideration for those other things that are in our capital list. And the recovery projects will be highlighted in the presentation and in the proposed budget, but we're still working on the details such as estimates and timelines. Funding sources for our capital projects or general fund projects, bond funding. The general fund is the most flexible type of funding. It can go to fleet, facilities, various other things. Bond funding is very specific to the categories that are approved by the voters. And in the case with the most recent bond, it was affordable housing, parks and recreation, public safety facilities, which includes the new construction, the remodel of fire and police stations, land acquisition for facilities, design work, and then also fourth category of funding was transportation, which is streets, sidewalks, signals, those types of improvements. And then the other funding source that we're dealing with at this point is public assistance or PA funding from FEMA. It is limited to the reconstruction of asset damaged by the storm, including some resilience and mitigation assistance. We do understand that the projects will develop beyond just a replacement in kind, and so that's what we'll look to and rely on CDB, GDR, HMGP, Federal Highway, a bunch of acronyms there, sorry about that, and just other grants to supplement those improvements. So again, quickly, in developing the 26 through 30, the 5-year CIP, we made some financial assumption that we have about $20 to $25 million capacity a year. And you'll see in the next table, we don't budget up to $25 million because there needs to be room to accommodate changes in materials costs and so on and so forth. But we're generally be in that range. Projects in this in the 5-year list are pulled from previous CIP requests and CIP documents and the requests that have been submitted. Planning documents, including facility study that Walter Ear has covered in the last couple of years, Recreate Asheville, which was approved last year, GAP plan, and so on. And then department collaboration about the projects that need to move forward. Projects are prioritized by our financial capacity, the facilities condition. We do various assessments on the facilities, including pavement condition index, which council recently passed the next analysis for that program, and then community input and preferences. And a lot of the community input and preferences are in some of our studies. The Recreate Asheville had a really robust public input process. So in a high-level summary, you see the draft, the FY 26 to 30 CIP draft here. You see on the general fund total at the bottom, you see that $22 to $23 million cap that we put on this, and that's trying to budget all of our capacity or capital needs within that $20 to $25 million range. We really focused on trying to create the 5-year CIP in this case, which programs all of that money for that 5-year period. So we can really start working on the plans and project development over time, and not have to be reactive in the years or the year that we're in, the budget year that we're in.
Jade, can you go back to that slide? Can you tell us, is this all the dollars the city will spend in these years on CIP? That includes general fund, CDBG-DR, bond revenue, everything all in?
It is not. No,
It
we'll
is
spend,
ju-
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
we should label this slide, because you do that later, and I know that was the answer, I was just asking you,
Appreciate it.
because if somebody clicks on this, they're gonna be like, how is this even possible? We have so much more damage in the city than
Yep.
this.
Yeah.
So,
We'll-
I always ask for slides to get relabeled, I don't think they ever actually do, but
I will
would
make sure
love,
that's
I
taken
would
care of.
love if this slide was.
No, we have a lot of work, and that's beyond this general fund capital. This is what we have been working off of. Similar table is what we've been working off of for years. We added bonds in 2016, which increased these numbers, and now we have recovery. So all of those are covered in here, but this is just the general fund CIP.
It's just the general fund,
Yes, ma'am.
debt and pay-go.
Yes, long-term
Yes.
debt. It also doesn't include enterprise funds.
It's
so
just
there are a
general
lot-
fund, debt and pay-go.
Yeah, long-term general fund debt.
Another clarifying question, I see that we all dream of a 10-year CIP and that we aren't there yet, it takes a lot more complexity. Are we gonna be able to see a bigger table that has general fund, CDBG?
Yeah, we're definitely working on that. We know that that's important, just to show the context of all of the spending. And so the presentation is trying to get that in 30 slides, but in the proposed budget, it'll be a little more succinct.
Okay.
Yep. So just kind of a general breakdown of what we're proposing to spend in the general funds, FY '26 CIP. These are examples of projects that we have, facilities, fleet and equipment, greenway expenditures. We are only listing in this as a demand on the budget capacity, the city's match in a grant situation. So the North Rad, there is MPO funding. The 800,000 only represents that city's contribution. Recreation facilities is a fairly short list, but then you do see more recreation expenditures in the bond list, and then also the recovery is heavy, as you all know, parks and recreation focused. And then also streets and sidewalks, again, the city matches are on here. And then these are some of the projects we've been talking about in parts and pieces over the last little bit, few months or a few years. I'm going to click on this link, but essentially one thing we're working on is project details sheets. So these are important. This is a common tool that's used in municipalities across the nation. One example I like to give is City of Alexandria, Virginia. I've used these in other municipalities I've worked in. But City of Alexandria uses these as good as anybody. They tell a story. They have an investment in a tavern that, and in their narrative, they say that this was, they hosted George and Martha Washington at one point in time. So, I mean, it really does help us to create the story of what have the significance of these assets, but it also helps us to help convey what needs to be done, when it's going to be done, who's managing the project, who supplies the project, who's supplying the project details, who's responsible for those. Links to the past studies and information, but essentially, again, the why behind the project and the costs. But also, it helps us to memorialize if we make recommendations and decisions today on what we're planning on doing in 5 or 6 years. We don't have to, in 5 or 6 years, wonder what the plan was. We'll have a reference to be able to go back on. So really trying to do that. In this case, I have the Transit Maintenance Center in here. It's a project we've been talking about a long time. It carries a pretty hefty price tag. But in order for us to be working towards that, we need to be able to put those bigger dollars, understand the need the timing for grant applications to the FTA, if that's a possibility, and be able to really plan for site development and those sort of things. And it's not something we should be looking at doing in 1 or 2 years. We need some time to work into that. And so we do have, this is one of several much larger projects that we need to figure out how to accommodate. Okay, so that's the general fund CIP. I can continue to move if there's not any questions. General fund, so the general obligation bond approved in November of 2024. We initiated some work on this. As a reminder, we had $20 million in each of these categories, which I touched on a little bit earlier. Some of the early work, FY25, London Road sidewalk design. We're working on trying to get RFPs out, or RFQs rather, for those. 26, we're looking at moving into the downtown for Lexington Avenue. Our street resurfacing is programmed. I showed $2.5 million. That's about what we spend on any one project for street resurfacing. That could vary from year to year, but in total over the period of the bond, it's $10 million. Malvern Hills Pool is an RFQ is being worked on right now for design services, and we anticipate that going to a bid in FY26. And then again, like I referenced, there's more expenditure in the next year in the parks bond. Public safety facilities. This is a new category for the bond. We didn't have this in 2016. But it is helping us to advance the investments in public safety buildings, which are out of date. And so certainly want to make those investments. There is some design work. There is new construction. We're advancing Oakley Fire Station and the police fire. That's a public station, so the fire and police presence in the Oakley neighborhood. I had a thought there I was going to share, but I seem to have lost it. But anyway, we're working through trying to make sure that we're investing in the fire. Oh, that's what it was. I do not include affordable housing. It's kind of consistent over my presentations on capital, because Nikki certainly can present that update better, and we can certainly find time to bring that back on the details about how they're rolling out the 2024 bond. Again, so I'm rolling through, and I will keep going until I hear stuff.
Before we move forward on this one, this is
Thank
Kim. Number one, the bond dashboard last time was so helpful, and I referenced it often. It was so helpful to be able to show the public where we were at with projects. Are we gonna do that again?
Yes. Right now, it's not in a great condition because we're kind of anticipating the bond, so we had proposed on there. We're working through some logistics, but yes, we are doing that. That's definitely it's a tool I use at my desk, so yes.
Wonderful. How's our grant writing capacity? Because it looks like there are a lot of opportunities to write grants, and I just wondered if it's possible we might be missing some grant opportunities if we have vacancies across our grant writing positions.
That's a great question. I think we'll have to follow up on that. I also do believe that might be some assistance in some of the recovery efforts that we're making if there's grants related to those. So that might be an opportunity for us to look for additional resources.
Thank you. It seems like it could be a force multiplier.
Absolutely. All right, Helene recovery. So this is we in January I was up here and was telling you that we're working on it. We're working through the FEMA public assistance or PA process. It's been a learning curve for us. We've made tremendous progress with the damage assessments and the field inspections that we've gone through. We actually are producing a document. We're handing those documents to FEMA in the field. And it's my understanding that the FEMA inspectors are really appreciative of those documents because it's doing a lot of the upfront work to help them understand our version of what has happened in the field. We have grouped projects into simple and complex projects, and really there's no simple project, but it helps to clarify one against the other. The simple criteria I went over in January, essentially they are preventing additional damage to the facilities that they're on. Municipal building roof is being done right now. Generally a one-for-one replacement with minimal or no public engagement. The roof is a really good example of that. A fence replacement might be another good example. City identified risk strategy for PA reimbursement is we've done the work to analyze the risk associated with not getting funds back, and so that's been an exercise that we've been going through with our Haggerty, our partners with Haggerty Consultants. Work completed may be completed in-house or with simple contract, and there's no or minimal amount of design and minimal opportunity for mitigation. So this is a long list. There's a note on the bottom, and this list is under development. We are pulling in projects that, as they are identified, we have until May 16th to be able to fully commit to the damage inventory, is what the FEMA calls it in their PA process. This is a fairly comprehensive list. The areas that the water and public works are the two areas that are least represented in here from a bulleted details list. So you can see we've categorized them because there actually is some value in us identifying them as a simple project, but grouping them so we can cut down on the administration. Each project that we go into has its own set of administrative burdens, and those are not light when administering grants. And so we're trying to be thoughtful in how we group these projects so they decrease the administrative burden long term. And then the various standalone projects list here was ones that are parks related, so there might be an opportunity to group those, but then again, they may just roll off as individual projects. 8 River Arts Place is, I'll get to the complex project grouping, but we also need to be careful about linking projects to a longer term project, and we felt like 8 River Arts Place might need to be a project that rolls sooner than later. And so we want to be cognizant, there's a lot of flexibility, so if we need to put that into another project later, we can do that, but right now we're trying to preserve the opportunity to run it on its own timeline. As you can see, generally, public works, infrastructures, roads, storms, mudslides, water is the same, very general. There is a longer, more specific list in that. We just have not incorporated that into these slides. All right, defining complex projects, essentially the opposite, I guess, of what I had previously talked about. These do just require more design, complex planning, contracting, and public engagement. They're more difficult from a risk management standpoint, from a reimbursement with FEMA PA process. So there's really no identified quick, easy fix for these. We really need to give them the full length of the PA process in their development.
So Jay, we got probably maybe 5 more minutes.
I'll get it. Yep, absolutely. All right, so the following slides show city assets that were damaged by Tropical Storm Helene grouped into complex projects. These groupings only list things that will be initially funded using the PA Public Assistance Funding Program. There are opportunities for considering adjacent projects, adjacent area development opportunities, but we really needed a base to work off through the PA program. A PA program has opportunity for mitigation, resilience, and then improvements beyond the base replacement will be funded through other sources. Grouping assets, as I mentioned, it helps with efficiencies in project administration and project management. And then grouping assets is a common, for common geography or similar features, is a common practice for PA projects. All right, so Fresh Broad Riverfront, this is a big project. We kind of had a little bit smaller scale, but when we did the River Arts District, it was 2.2 miles on the east side of the river in the River Arts District. So we feel like there is a good opportunity for us to like consider this as a continuous park system and really focus on this project as a whole. So this is really, and then also looking at the breakdown of damaged items, the Wilmot Dykeman and the French Broad River Greenways are intentionally bold because they, again, like Great River Arts Place, they may go on a different timeline. We may decide that those need to be front-loaded. The other things, we feel like it would be important for us to be able to like take advantage of having them grouped and the efficiencies associated with that. Swannanoa River, this is another title change that we need to figure out how to focus. This is the area pictured in the picture here, or this is the area focused in the picture here, which starts out in the Rec Park, the Gaseous Creek Bridge, moves on through the JBL complex. The soccer fields are specifically the responsibility of ABYSA, but we do have the structure in that field, and then also the parking lot sidewalks are ours to maintain, and into Azalea Park. But we do feel like there's opportunities for stormwater mitigation conversations and a broader conversation around how this project develops over time. But it's important that we include all of these assets in one grouping. Breakdown of those assets. Gaseous Creek Bridge is in and of itself a very complex project. Any bridge project is. There's so much linked to Gaseous Creek Bridge. We could do a whole presentation on it. So it's, again, highlighted in blue. It's bolded because it fits in this project, but there may be justification to have it outside the project. Municipal Golf Course was already moved, the RFQ on it. There's a revenue piece that's associated with it. This does not mean that it's the most high priority project. What it means is that we've just recognized that there was a revenue aspect to it, that it needed to move. And over time, these projects will be released at different times potentially, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll track in the same, along that linearly like that. There's the golf course as a general is a lot of acreage, and then also a specific restroom out there. The water plants have been damaged. These are assets. There's also treatment improvements that we're working on through the PA system and any other funding sources we consider on that. North Fork, Beech Tree, similar damages and similar attention needed there. These are a list of the assets. And then to just kind of summarize is that, again, the fact that these show different like start times is certainly something that we can't start everything at once. And so we're planning on moving into these projects in this way. But what it also represents is that, you see these various icons here. Staff did a great job of creating this. The icon with the person with their hand up is opportunity for public input or information sharing, as I'm up here today doing. We'll ramp up into project design. Council will have requirements for approving design contracts and construction contracts. We'll work with the public through design. You see on the top, that's all the complex projects, and then underneath is the less complex projects and their own timelines and how they're developing. With that,
Jade, can you
Yes,
go
ma'am.
back to that?
Yep.
You just presented so much information. Cheers to you for covering so much ground. Two things are bubbling up for me. One, it was brought up during our agenda briefing that parks like near the French Broad River are looking very barren, and folks are really concerned that we're moving trees that didn't appear to need to be removed. I imagine there's some mitigation strategy involved, but would you like a moment to speak to that?
Yeah, certainly, that is part of the project design. We'll certainly look into the restoration of riparian zones, just stream bank restoration, but also in the parks. I mean, we should certainly want to add back to that tree canopy where it was removed or destroyed. Those will be part of the design considerations, and certainly those, although FEMA PA is pretty sticky about landscaping, that's when we'll rely on the other funds to be able to contribute to add back to restore all of the vegetation in the tree canopy in those parks.
And then the second thing is, there's been a community concern raised around why the municipal golf course seemed to be moving ahead of things like business grants and rental assistance. But what I'm hearing you present today is this is a different pool of funds. So if we're looking at apples and oranges, we're literally putting this with the parks and which facilities are ready to move forward, and that those are moving simultaneously in a different pool of funds. This is not the CDBGDR funds.
That's correct, yeah. CDBGDR might have a benefit to these projects in the improvement. And so if there's a landscape need in a park, that could be a resource, potentially. I mean, as an example, there are potentially other resources, but yes, this entire list here is PA-funded projects, and we have to establish with FEMA what was broken, how it was broken, the cost of what, and agree to how the base costs in order for us to start developing projects and making those enhancements.
To speak plainly, the stuff that we have that was broken, the federal government is going to help us to replace like for like. And so we were doing work for it to be ready to move, and the municipal golf course was the first one that we were able to move.
That's right.
Okay, lastly, you just presented so many projects. There are a lot of people who are out of work. There are a lot of folks who are graduating during a time of economic uncertainty. This tells me that we are gonna need a lot of jobs helping in construction recovery. If anyone's paying attention right now online or in the room and you know someone who's interested, I know our IBEW electrical workers have apprenticeships. Spots are open now. We're gonna need help building our city back.
That's correct.
It's a great time to get into the
Thank you for
industry.
mentioning that. I think we're just key takeaways. Here's the budget timeline. Tony? It's just about self-explanatory. And then key takeaways, and then we can be done.
Yes, last budget work session, the proposed budget will come to you in May, May 13th to be exact. Thank you all for your time. Let's get about 10 minutes before the next meeting.
Shoot, go.
All right, thank you.